If you're thinking about moving to Tucson with kids, this isn't about sunshine or square footage. It's about whether the city actually supports your family long term, not just this year, but 5 years from now. One thing I've noticed is that families don't usually leave within the first 6 months. If they leave, it tends to happen around year 1 or 2. And most of the time, it isn't about the house. It's about how daily life ended up working here. When adults move by themselves, they adapt pretty quickly. When families move, the kids often adapt first, and the parents absorb the friction. So before you compare school districts, before you decide between Vail or Oro Valley, before you focus on backyard sizes or newer construction, it helps to understand how Tucson actually functions for families. Because most problems don't come from bad decisions, they come from incomplete ones. The first thing families underestimate here is distance. Tucson looks compact on a map, but it doesn't always feel that way once you live in it. A family might choose Vail because the homes are newer, or they might choose Dove Mountain because the community feels beautiful, or they might choose the foothills because of the views, or even Casa Dobis because the lots are larger. Any of those decisions can be right. The issue isn't the area. It's whether the area supports the life you're actually going to live every week. You might be further from doctors than expected, across town from club sports, 25 minutes from specialists your child sees regularly. Driving further than expected for activities you do every week at first doesn't feel like a big deal. But do it 3 times a week in July with 105-degree weather, that's when the friction starts to build. Families don't leave because Tucson is bad. They leave because they misjudged how far their daily life would stretch. The second thing families underestimate is how much summer shapes the routine. Every city has summer. Tucson's summer changes your behavior. In June and July, parks are empty in the afternoon. Sports will shift to either early morning or the late evening. Pool time becomes the default. Errands get planned differently. Even family gatherings happen at different times. If your family is used to spontaneous outdoor afternoons, you can still have a great life here, but you have to structure it differently. If you expect the same rhythm you had before, it can feel like something's off. It's not off, it's just the climate reshaping how the day works. One thing I see fairly often is what I call the Tucson Trap. A family visits in January. The weather is perfect, the mountains are incredible, everything feels easy. And they accidentally buy based on vacation mode. But raising kids here happens in July, not January. The families who adjust best usually evaluate both versions of Tucson before deciding. The third thing is the school conversation. People ask, are the schools good? That's understandable, but it's not the most useful question. The better question is this environment a fit for my child and our routine? Because schools matter, but families often discover that school quality isn't what determines daily happiness. The bigger factor is the family ecosystem. Are there other families nearby? Are kids the same age? Are activities close? Do parents naturally interact? Can community form without driving across town? That's where different parts of Tucson start to separate. Oro Valley can feel more structured. Vail often has stronger family density. Central Tucson can offer excellent magnet and charter opportunities, but it's less predictable from street to street. Casa Dobi often provides larger lots and established neighborhoods. And one thing families often discover after moving here is that neighborhoods have life stages. Some areas are full of young families, some are mostly established households, some are heavily retiree-oriented. None of those are inherently better. The question is whether the people around you are living a similar version of life, because community tends to form between households that are solving similar problems. Two families can live 10 minutes apart and have completely different experiences. The mistake isn't choosing a bad school, it's assuming all school experiences are interchangeable. When that assumption turns out wrong, the correction becomes expensive and disruptive. Here's a situation I've seen before. A family moves to Tucson and buys a beautiful home. There's more space, it's a newer construction, and they got it at a good price. However, 6 months later, they realize most of their routine exists somewhere else. The commute feels longer than expected. Their kids' activities require more driving. Summer feels more isolating than they pictured. The neighborhood is in a different life stage. Nothing went wrong, they just chose based on square footage before lifestyle and geography. That's when families start quietly asking whether the move fits long term. When families ask how to think about Tucson, I usually suggest keeping it simple. I call it the family fit test. 4 things to evaluate first. Commute radius. Where are you actually driving every week? Not once a month, but every week. Summer structure. How does your family handle heat, indoor time, and seasonal routine changes? Family ecosystem. Are there enough families nearby in the same stage of life? Not just children, but families. Because community usually forms between households before it forms between kids. Stage alignment. Are you building community, growing a family, or slowing things down? Notice what's not on that list. Price per square foot. That matters, but later. Families who start with lifestyle alignment usually adjust well. Families who start with a house often end up recalibrating after they move. Choosing the wrong neighborhood with kids doesn't normally create crisis. It creates friction. And enough friction repeated every week eventually changes how the move feels. That's the risk most families miss. If you're thinking about moving to Tucson with kids in the next 6 to 18 months, it's usually worth slowing the decision down, just enough to understand how your family actually lives before choosing a house, not the listing, but the structure around it, your routine, geography, your life stage, the daily logistics. Before I ever talk about houses, those are usually the first things I help families map. Because once those are clear, the neighborhoods tend to narrow themselves, and the real estate part becomes much simpler. If you'd like to see how I approach that process, I've included the details below. Tucson can be a great place to raise a family, but it works best when the move is intentional, not just affordable, not just bigger, but aligned. Thanks for watching.